Max, a 34-year-old financial expert, just returned from an extended work trip in Tokyo. He works for a prestigious firm and carries a great deal of responsibility, which often means he's away from home for long periods. His wife, Clara, 30, is a bright, independent woman with a successful career in marketing. They've been married for 6 years, and while they share a strong bond, Max's demanding job has caused a slow drift in their relationship. Clara, once a supportive partner, had always encouraged Max in his career ambitions. However, over time, she found herself feeling increasingly distant and neglected. She had built her own career and wasn't entirely dependent on Max, but she still craved attention and emotional support from him. When Max returned home after his trip, he felt something was off. The apartment they shared seemed different, the atmosphere colder. There was a subtle unease, and Max couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. As he unpacked, he noticed small changes, the way the living room was arranged, a missing item of sentimental value, and Clara's absence of the usual warmth. What was happening? Was it just his imagination, or was Clara pulling away from him? Max sat in the quiet of their apartment, trying to piece together what he had missed. Everything seemed normal at first, but the longer he thought about it, the more it all began to unravel. He'd been away for 3 weeks, working non-stop, while Clara had stayed behind in their bustling city apartment. What stood out to him now was the strange feeling of emptiness when he walked through the door. The first clue had come in their last video call before he returned. Clara had appeared distracted, looking more tired than usual. Max had assumed she was simply stressed from work. They'd exchanged brief pleasantries about his trip and the projects he'd been handling in Tokyo. However, something in Clara's eyes seemed different. It was subtle, but Max noticed the way she looked away just a little too quickly when he asked her about her day. As he scrolled through his phone, the texts between them had become colder. Clara's responses were clipped, distant, and often seemed rushed. She stopped asking how he was doing or showing interest in his updates. At first he had brushed it off, thinking it was just the pressures of her own busy life. But the longer the silence stretched, the more it weighed on him. Max's unease grew as he pieced together the puzzle. A few days before his return, Clara had been unusually quiet during their nightly calls. When he heard laughter in the background, a voice that didn't belong to her, he'd asked about it. She quickly dismissed it, claiming it was just the television. But Max knew better. This was no TV sound. He'd personally set up the sound system in their living room, and this was the unmistakable sound of a male voice. It was too much to ignore. Max's gut told him something wasn't right, so he started paying attention to the little things. When he landed at the airport, there was no response to his usual text, letting Clara know he was back. That was strange. Clara always responded within minutes. Even the Uber ride home felt longer, like he was being pulled into a situation he wasn't quite ready for. Her Instagram stories showed the same apartment, but from angles he'd never seen before. When he arrived at the building and tried to unlock the door, he felt the resistance in the key, and it dawned on him. The lock was new. He stood there in disbelief, his suitcase still in hand, struggling to process what was happening. Clara had changed the locks. It wasn't until he read her text that everything came crashing down. "I found someone better," it said, with a timestamp showing it was sent while she was likely watching him through the apartment's security cameras. She was in the apartment, on their couch, telling him she had moved on. Max felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. There was no need to make a scene or confront her directly. He simply typed a response. "Are you sure about that?" Then he walked away without looking back. He checked into a nearby hotel, his mind racing as he waited for more details. His friend, Luke, quickly pieced together what had been going on behind his back. Clara had been seeing someone named Ezekiel, a client of her firm. They'd been spotted together at restaurants over the past month. What was even more unsettling was Ezekiel's reputation. He had a history of targeting women in powerful positions, helping them reach career milestones, only to discard them once he was done. Max wasn't going to let this slide. His next move would set the stage for what was to come, and it was a game he planned to win. Max sat in his hotel room, his mind churning as he replayed the events of the day. It felt surreal, the sudden shift from normal life to this strange, uncertain reality. Clara's betrayal wasn't something he had expected, not after everything they had built together. But now, the pieces were falling into place. The first clue had been the small details, the missing pillow on the couch, the subtle change in the living room setup. He'd thought they were trivial at first, but they signaled something far deeper. And the laughter he'd heard on the phone, that had been the final nail in the coffin. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Clara was involved with someone else, and that someone was Ezekiel, a man from her firm. Luke, his old friend, had been the one to dig deeper. He quickly pieced together a pattern. Ezekiel had been spotted with Clara at various upscale restaurants in the city, and it seemed they had been growing closer over the past month. But it wasn't just the affair that caught Max's attention. It was Ezekiel's history. The man had a reputation for targeting powerful women in corporate settings, helping them reach career heights, only to discard them once they had served his purpose. This wasn't just a betrayal of their marriage. It was a carefully calculated move, one that involved far more than just emotions. Max opened his laptop, scrolling through their shared cloud storage. Clara had always been a little behind on technology, never bothering to change the passwords Max had set up. He found what he was looking for: photos of Clara and Ezekiel taken over the last 3 weeks. The images showed them together in places Max knew all too well. Their living room, their favorite coffee shop, the same spots they had frequented during their happy years together. The shock hit him harder than he expected, but he remained calm. Clara had made a grave mistake, and now he had the upper hand. The more he looked, the more he realized just how much Clara had overlooked in her haste to replace him. A document stood out among the photos, a financial agreement that he had helped Clara set up years ago when she began investing her savings. The document clearly stated that in the event of a separation, any investments Max had helped her with would be liquidated. It was a safety net he'd put in place, but Clara had no idea it would come back to haunt her now. Max paused for a moment, letting the weight of the situation sink in. He had worked too hard to let Clara destroy everything he had built for her, for their future. But now, it seemed like she was willing to throw it all away for a man who didn't even have the decency to hide his intentions. He needed to act, and he needed to act fast. He grabbed his phone and responded to Clara's earlier message. "You're taking this better than I expected. No fighting, no drama." His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he added, "Give me 4 days. Then we'll see who found something better." Max set his phone down, a sense of resolve growing inside him. He wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. It wasn't about revenge. It was about showing Clara just how much she stood to lose. And he wasn't going to let her destroy everything without paying the price. As the hours passed, Max made plans. He reached out to his lawyer, preparing to take action. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he wasn't about to let Clara's betrayal slip by unnoticed. She had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences. The next few days were a whirlwind for Max. As Clara's messages continued to flood his phone, his resolve only strengthened. She had no idea what was coming. He could feel her anxiety rising with every unanswered question, every text that went ignored. She was trying to cover her tracks, but Max had already seen through it. He was in control now, and it felt strangely empowering. Max spent the following day gathering his evidence, cross-referencing everything Clara had said to him over the past few weeks with the new information he was uncovering. He had already discovered that Ezekiel wasn't just an opportunistic lover. He was a manipulator, a man who knew exactly how to exploit powerful women like Clara for his own gain. Max's suspicion about him was confirmed when his friend Luke found out that Ezekiel had a history of targeting women in corporate positions, only to leave them once they had no further use to him. But what hit Max hardest wasn't the affair or the financial manipulation. It was the betrayal. Clara had always been his partner, the one person he trusted implicitly. To see her so easily slip into someone else's arms, to see her disregard everything they had built together, was a blow that left him questioning everything. But Max had learned a long time ago that emotions couldn't drive decisions. If he let his anger cloud his judgment, he would lose. He needed to stay calm, collected, and strategic. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the best way to deal with this wasn't through a dramatic confrontation, but by quietly dismantling everything Clara thought she had built. She needed to realize the gravity of what she had done. The next morning, Max made a crucial decision. He would not confront Clara directly. Instead, he would let her unravel. He opened his laptop and began drafting an email to his lawyer, instructing them to review all of the financial documents Clara had forgotten about, the investments she had made, the accounts she had accessed, and the contracts she had signed. He even included the screenshots of the emails between Clara and Ezekiel that he had found in the cloud storage, showing just how deep her betrayal ran. He wasn't just going to walk away. He was going to ensure Clara understood exactly how much she had to lose. As he sent the email, he felt a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about being petty. It wasn't about getting back at her. It was about making sure Clara realized the weight of her actions. She had thought she was making a better choice by replacing him, but what she didn't know was that she had just set in motion a chain of events that would cost her everything. Max's phone buzzed with a new message from Clara, this time filled with desperation. "What are you doing, Max? You don't understand. I didn't mean for it to go this far. We can fix this. Please." Max didn't respond immediately. He wasn't going to let her manipulate him into a quick decision. Instead, he simply sat back, watching as the pieces of his plan fell into place. His lawyer was already working on getting the necessary documents to make the situation clear to Clara. Meanwhile, he knew that the board at Clara's company would soon begin to investigate her activities that Max had carefully documented. For the first time in days, Max allowed himself to relax. He didn't need to fight back with rage or force. All he had to do was let Clara's actions catch up with her. Max spent the next few days watching everything unfold from the sidelines, like a director observing the chaos he had carefully orchestrated. His phone buzzed constantly, with messages from Clara, now increasingly frantic. She had started begging, pleading for a conversation, but Max refused to engage. He knew that her attempts to appeal to his emotions were nothing more than a last-ditch effort to regain control of a situation she had lost the moment she decided to betray him. But there was something deeper at play. As Max continued his quiet observation, he started to see a new opportunity unfold, one that he hadn't anticipated. The situation with Clara had triggered something within him, something that reminded him of his true potential, his power to create and control. For the first time in a long while, he felt completely free. His life was no longer tied to someone else's mistakes or manipulations. This betrayal had opened the door for Max to step into a new phase of his life, one where he was no longer bound by the constraints of his past relationship. He thought about his career and how for years he had put Clara's needs ahead of his own ambitions. He had supported her dreams, her career, and her success, but somewhere along the way he had neglected his own goals. Now, with the power he held over their joint investments and the leverage he had in the corporate world, Max realized that he could finally pursue the opportunities he had always dreamed of. The next morning, Max made a phone call to an old colleague, Olivia, someone who had been a trusted advisor during his early career. They discussed a potential business venture, something Max had been contemplating for a while but never had the courage to pursue. Now, with everything that had happened, the opportunity seemed ripe for the taking. Olivia was thrilled by the idea. "Max, you've got all the right pieces in place now. You've got a unique position in your industry, and with your track record, this could be huge." Max smiled as he hung up the phone. The path was clear. He would leverage everything he had, his expertise, his reputation, and the assets he had carefully built over the years, to launch his own business. And this time, there would be no distractions, no compromises. This was his moment to shine, to rise above the mess Clara had left behind, and create something entirely his own. But what excited him the most wasn't just the potential of his new venture. It was the knowledge that he was now free to make his own choices, to chart his own course. The power that Clara had once held over him, the control she had tried to exert, was now in his hands. She had made her bed, and now she would have to lie in it. Max wasn't motivated by revenge anymore. That part of the plan was nearly complete, and as he looked at the opportunities opening up before him, he realized that this entire experience had given him something far more valuable: clarity. The clarity to see that his future was not tied to anyone else's decisions, but his own. As he finalized plans for his new business venture, Max felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The storm was behind him, and now he was in control of everything. As the days passed, Max's perspective continued to evolve. What had initially felt like a devastating betrayal was now beginning to feel like a gift. The more he focused on his growth, the clearer it became. The collapse of his marriage had opened doors he had never imagined. In a way, Clara's actions had been the catalyst for his personal transformation. The moment he began to see beyond the confines of a relationship that had long since ceased to be fulfilling. The first step in his growth was recognizing his own strength. For years he had been the steady rock, always putting Clara's needs first. His work, his ambition, and even his sense of self-worth had all been tied to her success. Now, Max realized how much of himself he had sacrificed to support someone else's dreams. And while he didn't regret it at the time, the realization that he had neglected his own passions, his own potential, stung, but it was also liberating. The freedom to make his own decisions without being weighed down by the expectations of others was something Max had never truly experienced. It was time to focus on his own dreams. He had always been good with numbers and strategy, but he had never allowed himself to fully embrace his own entrepreneurial spirit. Now, armed with the lessons he had learned from both his career and his personal life, he was ready to step into the world of business on his own terms. Max began to take steps toward building something new. He poured his energy into developing a business plan for a venture he had always dreamed of, but never dared to pursue. Drawing from his years of experience, he knew that now was the right time. His connections, his knowledge, and the assets he had quietly accumulated over the years would form the foundation for this new chapter of his life. But Max's growth wasn't just financial or professional. It was deeply personal. For the first time in a long while, he took a step back and evaluated what he truly wanted out of life. He no longer cared about impressing others or proving his worth through his relationships. He was done with trying to be everything for everyone. The betrayal he had endured was painful, but it had taught him the importance of self-respect and the value of setting boundaries. He wasn't going to let anyone walk all over him again, not in his personal life or in his career. One of the most profound changes Max experienced was learning to trust himself. For years he had questioned his own instincts, constantly second-guessing his decisions because of Clara's influence. Now, he was trusting his gut more than ever. He was no longer afraid of making bold decisions. If anything, this new life had given him the courage to take risks, knowing that he had everything to gain and nothing to lose. As he looked back at everything that had happened, Max realized that the man he was becoming was someone far stronger and more capable than the man he had been. He was no longer defined by the person he had married or the life he had built around her. Max was finally embracing his true potential, and the world was wide open for him. This was the beginning of his real journey, one where his success wasn't just about wealth or status, but about living authentically and on his own terms. As the weeks went by, Max found himself in a place of unprecedented peace. The chaos of his personal life had given way to clarity and focus in ways he had never expected. The storm that Clara had unleashed was no longer raging. Instead, it had cleared the air, making way for a new sense of purpose. Max's new venture was coming together with precision. He'd already secured the necessary capital and was in the process of finalizing strategic partnerships. What had once been a distant dream was now becoming a reality. His past experiences, both the successes and the failures, had prepared him for this moment. He knew how to navigate the challenges of building a business, but more importantly, he had learned how to trust himself and his instincts. Despite everything that had happened with Clara, Max held no ill will toward her. The events had unfolded as they were meant to, and he had emerged stronger and wiser. His sense of self-worth was no longer tied to the approval or validation of others. Max had learned that true success wasn't about what others thought of him or how much he could accumulate. It was about living with integrity, standing firm in his values, and following his own path without fear. One evening, as Max sat in his new office, his corner office, a space he had built for himself, he looked out the window and reflected on how far he had come. The journey hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead. But he had never felt more in control of his life. He had taken back the power that had been stolen from him, not through retaliation, but through self-discovery and growth. Max thought about Clara one last time. He knew she had been living with the consequences of her decisions, watching everything she had built with him crumble. But that wasn't his concern anymore. The man he had become was someone who could no longer be manipulated or taken for granted. He had learned the hard way that sometimes the best way to handle betrayal wasn't by lashing out, but by quietly stepping back and letting someone else's choices play out. As Max continued to build his future, he found that the most satisfying part of all this was not the business success or the personal growth. It was the understanding that he had finally taken control of his own destiny. The path ahead was his to shape, and no one else would have the power to define it for him again. The best revenge, Max realized, wasn't about hurting others. It was about living your life in a way that left others wondering how they had lost so much, while you had gained everything. Max had truly found his strength, not in what he had lost, but in what he had found along the way: his own worth, his independence, and his ability to turn pain into power. Max's journey taught him an invaluable lesson. Sometimes, the worst experiences in life can lead to the best growth. Betrayal and heartbreak often feel like the end of everything, but in reality, they can be the beginning of something greater. Max's story shows that no matter how painful or unexpected life's challenges are, they can push us to redefine ourselves, regain our power, and pursue new opportunities. The key is in how we respond. We can let setbacks defeat us, or we can use them as stepping stones toward a better, stronger version of ourselves. Max realized that true strength lies not in avoiding hardships, but in learning from them and coming out the other side with more wisdom and resilience. His journey wasn't about revenge. It was about self-realization and personal growth. It was about reclaiming the narrative of his life and refusing to be defined by the actions of others. This lesson applies to all of us. When faced with adversity, we often feel overwhelmed or powerless. However, just like Max, we can choose to view setbacks as opportunities to grow. Instead of holding on to anger or regret, focus on self-improvement and your long-term goals. Use challenges as fuel to pursue what truly matters to you. Whether it's a career change, a personal goal, or simply improving your emotional resilience, every setback is a chance to come back stronger.